The Kremlin is denying reports that Moscow is pressuring Belarus to get more deeply involved in the war against Ukraine. Dmitry Peskov called the claim completely untrue after a report by the Wall Street Journal. He was also asked about President Zelensky's statement that relay equipment in Belarus had helped Russian drones strike Ukraine. Peskov's answer was classic Kremlin. He said he had no information and suggested asking Minsk instead. Very convenient. When Russian drones fly, Belarusian territory helps, and Ukraine is hit, Moscow suddenly becomes an innocent bystander.
As for the repeaters, I do not have such information. The work of repeaters is within the competence of the relevant departments. I think you should address your questions on this matter not to Zelensky in Kyiv, but probably to Minsk, and there they will answer you. As for the report by the publication you mentioned, it is completely untrue. We have a union state with Belarus. We have a whole list of joint projects on the agenda. We have the most advanced form of integration with Belarus, which continues. And Belarus is our closest ally.
Russia's fuel crisis is gaining speed. First, Russians were lining up at gas stations. Now fuel is starting to disappear from public transport as well. In at least 4 Russian regions and in occupied Crimea, bus routes are being reduced or cancelled because of diesel shortages. In Zabaikalsky Krai, local authorities openly cite a limited amount of fuel. In Kaluga region, suburban routes have been cancelled. Carriers in Rostov and Tula regions are also complaining about shortages, and in occupied Crimea, train services have been sharply reduced.
Yesterday, the situation was kind of fun. Today, not anymore. There is no gasoline in Taganrog. There is no gasoline on the Taganrog highway either. Where are we supposed to refuel? What are we supposed to do? What happens? I drove around 5 gas stations today. It's so unpleasant. I really shouldn't have sold my bicycle. There is simply no gasoline, and this is the situation at every Rosneft gas station in Irkutsk. I don't understand what is happening. Why does no Russian region have problems like us?
Soon, this may stop looking like a local inconvenience and become routine across the huge territory of the aggressor state. Belarus' self-proclaimed President Alexander Lukashenko says he warned President Volodymyr Zelensky representatives not to drag Belarus into a war. According to him, they recently came to see him and he told them to pass a message to the Ukrainian president. The tone, of course, was deeply peace-loving, as long as we forget that Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine from Belarusian territory. And as long as we forget Kyiv's statement about relay equipment in Belarus that helped Russian drones strike Ukrainian cities. The illegitimate Belarusian president did not mention those repeaters at all. Instead, he threatened that if Ukraine pressured Minsk, the quality of the war would change immediately.
I just recently had Zelensky representatives sitting where you are, and I told them directly, pass it along to your president. If he thinks he can be talking to us in this manner and dragging us into a war, then he must understand that in this case, the quality of the war will change momentarily. This war will be completely different. By the way, we received a response. The president understands that along with them. So let's come to an agreement, guys. We need to make a substantial agreement. No need to kick up dust. No need to shout. No need to try to punch in the face the Russian way. Let's just act humane.
Just act human sounds especially rich from Minsk, because for almost 5 years, Belarus has been a Russian military platform in this war. Drones and missiles have been launched at Ukraine from Belarusian territory. But Alexander Lukashenko still says Belarusians do not want to shoot Ukrainians, and Ukrainians supposedly do not want to fight Belarusians. And then all this staged peace-loving rhetoric ends with one line: in any situation, Belarus will stand alongside Russia.
Listen, the president of Russia and I have discussed this topic 1,000 times. How are we going to fight Ukraine if it's mostly territorial troops on the other side of the border? Are we going to shoot these mechanics, milkmaids, and working guys who don't want to fight Belarusians? We also do not want to fight Ukrainians. Therefore, our position is, Andrei, just so you understand, we are peace-loving. But in any situation, we will stand alongside Russia.
Kyiv was burning again overnight after Russia launched another ballistic missile attack on the Ukrainian capital. Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko said 2 people were injured and treated at the scene. Russia had quite a busy night. Drones targeted Moscow, the Tula region, and occupied Crimea. In Moscow, Mayor Sergei Sobyanin reported air defense activity and claimed that drones had been shot down. Because of the attack, restrictions were introduced at 3 airports: Domodedovo, Vnukovo, and Sheremetyevo. Special attention goes to the Tula region. The Azot chemical plant in Novomoskovsk came under attack. It is one of Russia's largest chemical enterprises, producing ammonia, nitric acid, methanol, fertilizers, and raw materials for the Russian military industry. Occupied Crimea also had its share. Explosions were heard near the Kerch ferry crossing. The occupation authorities are not exactly generous with the details, but the geography of the night speaks for itself. Moscow, military-related chemistry near Tula and Kerch. A major Ukraine recovery conference has wrapped up in Gdansk. The agenda was packed with the issues that matter for Ukraine right now: budget support, energy ahead of the next heating season, investment in infrastructure, logistics, and industry. The main takeaway is that the European Union has transferred the first tranche from a new 90 billion euro loan package for Ukraine. This is 3.2 billion euros in microfinancial assistance. The money will go to defense, state stability, and the energy system before winter.
I also want to say thank you to European partners for the critically important 90 billion financial support instrument for Ukraine. And we have a great news. The first disbursement of 3.2 billion euro will be announced today.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen also reminded the audience in Gdansk of the bigger figure. Since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion, the European Union and its member states have already provided Ukraine with 200 billion euros in economic, financial, and military support. Now another 90 billion euros package will be added over the next 2 years.
The prosperous Ukraine of tomorrow requires massive investments today. Since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion, the European Union and its member states have provided 200 billion euros in economic, financial, and military support. And with the Ukraine support loan, we will provide a further 90 billion euros over the next 2 years. And indeed, today we are transferring the first tranche under this loan, dear Julia, more than 3.2 billion euros in macro-financial assistance. So you're right, I'm happy and proud to announce this disbursement today.
In total, more than 160 agreements worth over $10 billion were signed during the conference. But money for recovery is only one side of the story. The next winter campaign will be a serious test for Ukraine.
Now we work hard together with support of our partners to prepare all the infrastructure for the tough winter. It means that we need to recover more than 10 gigawatts of generation. We need to create new generation, around 3 gigawatts of new decentralized generation, which will be not vulnerable to Russian attacks and which can work into the island mode. Plus we construct protection of different levels to protect from missiles and drones. We increase air defense. So all of these measures now are implemented. We work closely with all the partners, with European Commission, with Energy Support Fund, with Energy Community, and actually yesterday we have held very good fourth Energy Rammstein meeting. So all of these measures, I'm sure, will help us to survive during the next winter, no matter, or it will be the war winter or the war will stop. This winter will be tough and we should be ready.
The Ukraine Recovery Conference in Gdansk took place against an awkward diplomatic backdrop. While European leaders were talking about money, reconstruction, and long-term support for Ukraine, Kyiv and Warsaw were trying not to let a historical dispute poison the room. The tension followed Poland's decision to revoke Volodymyr Zelensky's order of the White Eagle after the named a Ukrainian Special Forces unit after the Ukrainian insurgent army. For Poland, the UPA remains tied to wartime atrocities against Poles. For Ukraine, the question is also about its own memory, dignity, and the right to define its heroes during a war for survival. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky did not attend the conference in person. The delegation was led by Prime Minister Julia Svyrydenko instead. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said he saw that as a gesture of de-escalation, but the dispute is still sensitive.
Let's start with the technical and political aspects. I think it makes a lot of sense that the president's office decided Volodymyr Zelensky shouldn't travel to Poland right now. If he had gone, journalists would have focused on this conflict, one that needs to be diffused, not inflamed. If we rewind 20 years, this issue seemed more or less resolved. It had been resolved in part thanks to an appeal from Pope John Paul II, a Pole himself, who said, "We forgive and we ask forgiveness." At that point, it seemed the question of historical memory had been set aside and moved on to a more practical working level. Poland needs to understand that we have our own heroes, even though we share some common interests with them. Despite differing interpretations of history, we have the right to our dignity, the right to decide for ourselves who our heroes are. No country has the right to tell us otherwise.
Emmanuel Macron and Giorgia Meloni are trying to show that France and Italy are back in business after a period of a very visible tension. The French president called Italy an indispensable and natural partner for Paris, presenting the summit in Antibes as more than a diplomatic photo op. He framed it as a reset of Franco-Italian cooperation at the European level, and Ukraine appeared in that wider frame. Emmanuel Macron said that initiative discussed from Ukraine to Lebanon give Paris and Rome a common agenda, a stronger role inside Europe, and a shared mission to defend international law and a more stable world order.
Everything we decided today regarding joint action at the European level and the initiatives taken from Ukraine to Lebanon allow us to have a common agenda that gives Italy and France an even stronger relationship, as well as their usefulness within Europe, and our usefulness in defending an efficient international law and a more stable international order.
Denmark is tightening the rules for temporary protection for Ukrainians. Ukrainian men aged 23 to 60 who are not exempt from military service will no longer be able to receive a residence permit in Denmark under the special Ukraine law. Copenhagen is saying that Denmark's protection rules are not meant to be used as a way to avoid mobilization in Ukraine. Immigration and Integration Minister Morten Botskov said Denmark stands side by side with Ukraine in its fight for freedom, but does not want its residence rules to weaken Ukraine's defense effort. Importantly, the changes will not affect residence permits that have already been granted. As for early May, more than 47,000 displaced Ukrainians were living in Denmark with their residence permits under the special Ukraine law. The broader EU decision on the future of temporary protection for Ukrainians is still ahead. The current directive remains in force until March 4th, 2027. That's all for now. Thank you for watching.